Broken Truth. This is John Davidson and Clinton Ohlers, PhD. And today we have Georg Della Pietra, who has a company called Safe Blood, and Clinton is going to tell us all about it.
George, thank you very much for coming on the show. We're very interested to hear about Safe Blood and how you came to develop it. George, as I understand it, you have founded Safe Blood so that you can connect individuals who need blood and are themselves unvaccinated or would prefer unvaccinated blood, connect them with donors who are unvaccinated because of concerns of things that may remain in the blood for really an unknown duration of time post-vaccination. Is that correct?
Right, Clinton, that's exactly the case. I have a background in naturopathy, and I did a lot of dark field microscopy in my clinics in the 80s and 90s. And when I've seen for the first time a dark field picture from a vaccinated person, from a COVID vaccinated person, I was horrified. I've never seen anything alike in my praxis before. So it was definitely immediately clear for me there is something going on. I did not know what it is exactly at that point. So I did some research and I found lots of scientists who had already developed that there is really a big problem with the mRNA vaccines coming to us.
As I understand it, there's three things that we're concerned about. The persistence of the spike protein. Then you've got the mRNA itself.
Right now, even scientists in the mainstream will have to confess that we actually don't know anything. I remember when I was talking to Professor Bhakti, one of the best scientists in this field, 1.5 years ago when I started. He said to me then, we don't know exactly about the spike proteins. Will they stay for 4 or 5 days is what we think now, or will they maybe stay a bit longer? In the meantime, Bhakti says, we don't know, but we can assume that it might stay for years or they will stay even forever. So the spike proteins is one thing. The other two things you mentioned are the other things. These are particles we see in the blood. They go into the bloodstream, and we don't really know how long they actually stay. We're trying to find out, we're trying to do this really scientifically, because until now we have only the dark field microscopy, which is not recognized by Western medicine as a valuable method. But the fourth thing is actually, which is very troubling, that all these facts destroy the immune system completely. So after 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks, your immune system is so damaged that actually it does not really matter anymore whether you have any particles in the blood, because you will most likely not die on these particles or the spike proteins, but on the fact that your immune system broke down. So when your next flu or whatever comes, then you have a problem.
Is that part of the concern then about being vaccinated through the back door by receiving vaccinated blood? Is that if you have persistent mRNA in the blood of the donor?
Exactly. One of our members who said that her mother, she's unvaccinated. And finally, so she got, for some other reasons, she had a problem in the stomach. She needed a surgery. She got to the hospital and they gave her a blood pack. And this happened a few weeks ago. She left, the surgery was successful. She left the hospital and she got admitted to the hospital after a few days again with thrombosis, exactly what we always see very often after these vaccinations. So even though she did not get the vaccine, she had exactly the same symptoms as the vaccinated 1 week after getting a blood transfusion. The function of the liver is to get rid of all kinds of toxins which come into our body. And the liver is able to get rid of a lot. Everything which is organic, the liver will somehow deal with it. Everything which is not organic, like most chemicals, for instance, the liver simply does not know what to do with it. So it just puts it in the tissue or anywhere, which is usually then accumulating in the joints. This is why so many people have problems in the joints. And these things like the graphene oxide or whatever you find there, they are huge. They're really huge compared to other things which are usually in the blood.
On your site, you have this photo from the dark field microscopy. On the right, you have what look like more normal blood, but on the left, they're stringy and clustered. They don't look like blood cells. Can you explain what's going on there?
The cluster, which you seen on the right side, you see more or less healthy blood. This is what blood from the most of us, if we are more or less in good health, will look like. And on the left side, you did all these clusters you have. They show that the blood actually cannot move freely at all anymore. It clusters, and that's also what scientists or what the medical personnel in the hospitals now realize. We have lots of thrombosis. They come from these clusters, of course. And these thrombosis, if you have a thrombosis like this in the heart, for example, then you simply die. So if the blood cannot move freely, the blood cells, and it's mainly also due to a lack of oxygen, then we have this picture like we have it on the left, which is highly alerting. It looks even more horrifying when you see it live, because this is actually nothing moving, what we see here on the picture, but under the microscope, these things are moving. It's living, and then it's even worse.
Even though it says dark field, it's really a white light, right?
Yes, I mean, the thing is, there are things we see now when we use different methods. And I'm pretty sure there are other things we don't even see, which are there too. So this might be the top of the iceberg, which we discover here. And for me, it does not really matter. And I also state this on the website. Whatever the reason is why somebody does not want these jabs or the blood which comes through the jabs, for me it does not matter, because as long as I don't see this, I simply don't want it. And most of our members are exactly the same.
How does Safe Blood work then? Can you tell us a little bit and tell the listeners how it works, how people can get involved, and then when you see blood becoming available?
Yeah. Well, the nice thing is in the United States, we have a different situation than in most of Europe. In the United States, you can go to a hospital and you can bring your brother or a friend with you and ask them to take him as your blood donor. In Europe and other parts of the world, this was normal until COVID came too. You could go into every hospital and do this. Nowadays, they don't even allow you to take your own blood. However, I heard that in the States, this is still possible, which means the blood is available immediately, because we have a network of members, and all these members are in a database as donors with all their medical details, and they're already there. You have to become a member to be in this database. And then on our website, you can look for, let's say, you live in New York, you have a blood group O+, so you go on the website and you check for New York, your blood group, and you can immediately see whether there are members available or not. And the more members we have, the faster, of course, it goes, until we have this everywhere in the States. And then we can actually immediately start. You might have to go to your hospital and they will say, no, we don't do it. And then you will have to insist until they do it. It's very important. This can be done. Next step will be indeed to create our own blood bank. I tried to approach the Red Cross in many countries, and I wanted them to be medical partners. Of course, they refused, because they still refuse to distinguish between vaccinated and unvaccinated blood. It means we have to set up our own blood banks, which we have to see in each country, in each state, how is the legal situation, how can we do this. I think this will take a little bit of time. This is why I'm very happy that we can already start with the mediation of blood donors and receivers immediately.
Have you considered making sort of a public database of hospitals that are more friendly to the concept?
We already have it.
Great.
On our website, you can not only look for a potential donor, which has the same blood group, but you can also look for a medical partner, which are all these clinics which I have been personally writing to, and this was in Switzerland and in Germany. I have been writing to 600 clinics, and they're all in this database. I asked them to make an online survey based on questions like, do you allow the choice of the free blood donor? Do you require masks, vaccinations, certificates, or anything like this? So a couple of questions, and I asked them to fill them out. These hospitals I was writing to, Germany and in Switzerland, they're already in this database. In the United States, we just started, and we're in the process of setting up a team. As soon as we have our team together, we will do the same thing in the States, because even though I know that in the States it will not be so difficult to find actually a hospital which will accept you the way you are, but you still will have to fight sometimes. And if you are admitted and you're, I don't know, you have cancer or something like this, the last thing you want is to start to fight with your surgeon. So it's ideally, if you can ahead look for which is the hospital which will be friendly to me and which will not. So as soon as we have our team together in the States, we will do exactly the same thing, and you will be able to look also for a medical partner.
Which countries do you find to be more amenable to the concept?
None. That's the bad thing. So, I mean, I started to write to hospitals in Switzerland 1.5 years ago. So some of them I have written 3 times in the meantime. But if I look around, there are a few countries like, of course, the African states. In Africa, it's absolutely no problem. You go to any hospital, and they will even ask you if you can bring a blood donor, because they don't have enough blood, and they don't see any medical problems with using the blood of a relative. So they will even ask us, no problem, everywhere in Africa, actually. So Africa is sort of a paradise right now. Then for me, the second one was the United States, which I recently discovered that you can also do this, but you may have to fight a little bit for your rights, but you can, and you will get right in the end. While the whole rest of the countries, we are in Asia. In Europe, no chance. All over Asia, no chance so far. We just started in South America. To be honest, I don't know yet how it is there. I'm very actually optimistic that in Mexico, for instance, you can do what you want. We are trying to establish sort of a medical tourism to these countries. For instance, we also start in Canada right now, which is very close to the United States. So Canada is very restrictive. They don't let you do anything. So they're really they're going very tough to the anti-vaxxers. So I could easily imagine that as soon as we have a couple of clinics in the States, that people from Canada will come and make their surgeries in the United States.
You indicated that these policies emerged post-COVID. So do you see was this a reaction to people coming in and requesting unvaccinated blood? Did this precede the demand for unvaccinated blood? I'm just wondering about the timeline of all this.
Yeah, it's interesting because all the clinics I was writing to in Germany, they have been they are still actually on an internet page which lists only clinics which do the autologous transfusion, which means you can at least donate your own blood. They're listed there, and I got lots of answers from them who say, we don't do this since many years anymore. So I'm sure if you would now go how many years it is, then I'm pretty sure you would end up like 2019, maybe for the last. So for me, it's definitely all part of a bigger plan. They simply just want to get everybody vaccinated. But however, I don't know what the reason might be. This is my idea. You don't have to agree with that. But it's a fact. And the fact is that even clinics, even in Switzerland, for instance, like 1 year ago, we had the first case in Switzerland where a clinic refused to do an autologous transfusion, where they said, no, you cannot donate your own blood. And now they try, of course, to argue with all kinds of ideas. They say, okay, now we don't do it anymore because we need a license and there was no request for this in the past 2 years. So this is why we let this license run out. But it's just a little bit too much of a coincidence from my point of view.
Yeah, there were lots of coincidences. For example, in 2019, I think just before COVID, France removed hydroxychloroquine from being over the counter. And then suddenly, everyone needed it or wanted it, and you couldn't get it. But these are all conspiracy theories according to modern journalism.
Yes, they are, and unfortunately, all the conspiracy theorists, which is a title which I probably have now too. We just had an article in Vice recently, which calls me a conspiracy theorist. Fine, okay, I put a medal on my breast, and I think that's okay because we were absolutely right with everything so far.
My favorite part about that article, I just posted to Twitter about it because it made me laugh. When I was in journalism school, this is probably one of the worst opening paragraphs of complete bias I have ever seen, and I just want to share it with you a little bit so that we can all have a good laugh at it. Anti-vaxxers, well, we've now negatively labeled, so the first word is wrong. Anti-vaxxers are trying to create a new global infrastructure for the supply of unvaccinated blood. We're okay here, comma, driven by conspiracy theories and pseudoscientific beliefs about the dangers of mRNA COVID vaccines. That's so amazing, that whole statement. And then third paragraph, he and his supporters believe, comma, wrongly. So you can't even get through the first three paragraphs without obviously just wanting to crucify you, right? This is the goal, is obviously to destroy your reputation in as few words as possible.
Yeah, it's so contrary to good journalistic practice. I mean, that people are taught. I mean, not even in graduate school, but as an undergraduate in a journalism class. I mean, these are the first things they tell you not to do.
I mean, there's so much bias. I mean, it's
bad.
And to be fair, I mean, these people, they think they're doing the right thing. I think in a lot of cases, but you have to look at what is the reaction they want. Why do they care?
The funny thing is that, of course, the journalist called me, and then I checked first the portal, what he's working for, and I asked, you never do anything which are a bit critical to the mainstream? And he said, no, we want to do a bit more now, and so I just do something about the blood thing, and so he looked very supportive. But then when we see the article, it's the opposite. He just tries to make us all ridiculous. And the way he's doing it, it's so bad that I got tons of emails and reactions which say he reached exactly the opposite that what he wanted, because people read through this article, the ones that read it at least, and they say, there might be something true. And the nice thing, the whole article is quite long and it contains a lot of things which we know are actually not true. But the end, the last paragraph, the last sentence actually is amazing, because he writes there that the authority in the United Kingdom actually, which is doing the blood transfusion things, that they are considering now to distinguish the blood of the vaccinated and unvaccinated. And this is actually a bomb, comes in the last sentence and is not commented at all anymore. And the interesting thing about it is that we have scientists like, for instance, we have Professor Hockertz in Germany. He's a guy who was personally involved in developing mRNA vaccines. The idea is great behind it, but it simply did not work. And he found out after 10 years we cannot make it work. And he stopped. He went out of the research. And as a result, he had to flee Germany, actually. He went to Switzerland, where he found sort of a refugee. And he's now one of the biggest critics, of course, of the system.
It's very reasonable that a person would say, I don't want my own cells creating the pathogenic part of the virus indefinitely for how long we don't know, into what quantities we don't know, so that my own body then has to fight what my own body has now been programmed to do with something that we don't know how long lasts in the system, but we do know it doesn't last as short as it was supposed to last. I mean, these are real, legitimate concerns, right? So contrary to how that's being portrayed, it's not a hysteria or a conspiracy theory. This is just simply common sense response, now knowing more that we know about what the technology really does.
Sooner or later, this all has to come out, especially since we are only at the beginning. But the problem is that the WHO has now an agenda to replace all the normal vaccines with mRNA vaccines, which means if you get your next flu shot in a year or so, it will be based on the same technology. And this is horrifying.
What we're all hoping is that the worst concerns do not materialize. We're hoping that the mRNA only lasts in the system, say, maybe up to 6 weeks or something like that. Hopefully it isn't indefinitely. But the concern is you don't know when the person that you received the blood from was necessarily last boosted, right? So you might have somebody who just got a booster 4 weeks ago, and they still have mRNA in their blood, and you get that and receive that blood. Now it's in your blood. On the World Tribune website today, there's a Substack that keeps track monthly of people who just died suddenly out of the blue. For example, this very first one that they have today is Kayla Rose Lumpkins, a healthy 18-year-old from Texas who died in her sleep on the day she took the COVID booster shot. Her mom said she had no health issues. She takes the booster. She dies in her sleep that night. Now, this is a girl who survived the first 2 vaccines.
That's what I say. It accumulates. You may survive 1 shot, you may survive 2. With each additional one, it simply gets worse. And there is no study in the world which says the opposite, because even, let's say, countries like Israel, they were always ahead of us, like 1 or 2 shots even. And they see exactly the same thing, that with each additional shots, all these thromboses, the reason for the death is always a thrombosis, which is usually then in the heart or in the brain. They see that this does not decrease at all. It increases, and it especially increases in young people.
There's three types of people, or people in 3 different types of situations, more accurately, who are going to be looking for blood from unvaccinated donors. So you have somebody, say, like us, who is aware of these issues and can plan ahead, okay? And that's most people, right, who haven't received the vaccine or don't want another virtual booster, right, by way of, even if they have been vaccinated and they said, I don't want it anymore, so I would like unvaccinated blood. They can all plan ahead, right? But then you've also got somebody who finds out, I have some disease that requires a surgery or whatever. I'm going to need blood in 3 weeks or a month or whenever this procedure is scheduled. And then you have another group of people who are going to be, you suddenly find themselves in a car accident or something. There's an emergency where they need blood right away, or a family member does. How do you, what can we tell people so that they can be prepared? And then what can they do if the time that they're going to need blood is a very short distance away?
Well, the first 2 groups you just mentioned, for them is not a problem anymore. They simply become members, and then they're in the network, and whenever they need somebody, we can provide somebody. And of course, at Safe Blood, we do not exclude vaccinated people. They still can become members, and they can still receive blood. Of course, they cannot give blood. They cannot be donors. And sometimes I have members, they say, why don't you exclude the vaccinated ones? But I simply do not want to be part of the fascism which is going on in the medical field right now. So for me, I don't make 2 groups of people, the vaccinated and the unvaccinated, in a philosophical sense. For me, it's a pure medical sense. Some people have the shot and some don't have it. And the ones who have it, some of them were simply forced to do it. So I'm not a judge. I don't have to judge anybody on making a mistake. I made many mistakes in my life too, so I don't want to be judged for this. everybody can. So these first two groups are taken care of. And for the third group, the ones which really come as an emergency case into a hospital, then we have a bigger problem, and because we don't have blood products yet. So we will need blood products. But in the meantime, until we have this, we have another thing. We have a member card for our members, which has a QR code which directly brings the medical professional in the hospital to your living will. And in this living will, you state that you do not want vaccinated blood, that you do not want mRNA products, and that you want blood from this and this donor. You specify a person of trust which will give you blood, and if the medical professional in the hospital reads this living will and accepts it, and in an emergency case he will have to accept it simply, then he is obliged to do what is written there. And we do not only write that we want blood donations only from certain people or certain members of our group or whoever, which group ever. We specify also that we do not want any blood transfusions to be carried out before every other option is excluded. Let's say there's one thing which is very important, which is called the autotransfusion. Autotransfusion is a surgery technique which collects the blood of the person who is operated on. This person loses blood, it collects it and brings it back into his bloodstream. And this can be done in most cases, actually. And hospitals, they have these machines ready, but they don't use them. So our living will is forcing the medical staff at this moment to use this. And if they use this, actually, the autotransfusion, then you can prevent a high number of transfusions at all. And for me, the best transfusion is not even one from unvaccinated blood. The best one is anything which is prevented. If we can prevent transfusions, these are the best ones.
In following that logic, isn't it possible to donate your own blood to save for yourself?
This is something which has been done. Let's say if you do it, if you have a scheduled surgery. The problem is if you want to have, let's say, you store it at home or I don't know where, that blood products, they have a life expectancy between 4 and 6 weeks. And depending on the product, if it's the plasma or something else, it varies then. But more than 4 to 6 weeks is not likely to have it, so it does not really make sense. It would make sense if you do this, let's say, in an organization like Safe Blood, where we say, okay, we do it, and after 4 weeks, we know in 2 weeks it will expire, we give it to the Red Cross or whoever wants it, and they have at least some, so you don't throw it away. And I'm actually very confident that I will convince laboratories, which we also will approach, to partner with us, that we can say, okay, in case of we have this blood, we do not only use it for us, but we also give it for everybody else, because we cannot store it too long anyway.
How does the donor process work?
Okay, how do we reach these people? Do we reach them through people like you who let us talk about it? Because the first thing is you have to know that we exist, because this is a very new thing and it did not really exist. We're here since 1 year, but we started in Switzerland and then we slowly expanded all over the world. So we are here and we are ready to proceed. We have this thing, we only need more members. So the next step is to become a member, and when you're a member, it's quite a process. You have to answer many questions about your health, about your personal things. So if you go through this, then you're in our system, and then it's immediately, then you're ready to connect. You can directly from our website click a button which will send me an email or whoever it is. Then there is a telephone number you can call, and we are looking then for the closest donor in your area. Actually, if you have time, if you're not an emergency case, you can even look yourself on the website. You can look, okay, in New York we have 10 people, and then you can actually send us an email and we will find the 3 closest ones to your address and we'll connect you together. Or in the case if you're in a hospital, the hospital will connect these donors, because usually you have to have more than one, maybe 2 or 3, which have to go then to the hospital and donate their blood. And all our members are willing to do it.
George, thank you. This has been fascinating.
Yeah, George, we're going to keep in touch with you, and please let us know how this goes. And if you have updates, please let us know. We'll bring you back.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, John. Thank you, Clinton. Anytime with updates. We're right now looking on partnerships with other groups, of course. We, as I told you, we are putting a team together now for the United States, and there are already some local groups. There is another group in the south of the United States which has exactly the same goals. They are not as advanced as we are yet, but they will come and they will do their own thing. And I will make sure that whenever other groups come in, that we will share our data. We have to find a way, because I want to be this a worldwide thing, and we have to find a way that if other groups are doing similar things, that we share our data. Let's say if Clinton tomorrow opens something similar, I need to make sure that I can access his data and vice versa. And this is what I will focus on next, because I'm sure maybe we were the first ones, but we will not be the only ones. And for me, the most important thing is networking. We just have to get together and all pull on the same string. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Great. Thank you, George.